Good morning, everyone. So, your brain and bias, how does it affect your decisions, right? If you have a brain, you have a bias. That's the tagline of and trademark of our speaker today. But wait, don't shut down. Okay, let's roll it back because I was there too. This is not just about race. These are the assumptions that we make educated that educates our decision and how it affects our businesses. So let's talk about it. We're going to have Matthew Cahill on the show today. He'll be sharing. So let's go. Good morning, everyone. Paula Madison here, Power Marketing SF, your offsite marketing department, and host of 10 at 10. This morning, I have with me Matthew Cahill, founder of the Precipio Company. Matthew's deep expertise in cognitive, social, and workplace biases is rooted in the belief that if you have a brain, you have a bias. He works with executives to reduce mental mistakes, strengthen workplace relationships, and disrupt said bias. Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Paula. It's great to see you.
So this is a big topic. I'm like, folks, even just before the show started, we were going through and narrowing things down because it's a big topic. So right off the back, I'm going to say before we even start, reach out to Matthew, connect with his, check out his website, check out his LinkedIn page. There's so much great information, and check out some of the information on the resource page as well. Matthew, I'm going to throw this right over to you. Please disrupt us for a second because for so long, I too would hear the word bias and go straight to race. Disrupt that mindset for me for a second.
Yeah, I think that's a bit myopic for the word bias. There's certain terms like bias that I refer to as slippery terms because they mean something different to the person that's saying the word than it does to the person that's hearing the word. If you have 10 people in a room, you could realistically have 10 different understandings of the same word. And so that's why I call them slippery.
Yeah, no, completely. And until you educated me about so much, I was kind of there as well. So how does this affect our interaction with others? And of course, in the workplace, with our clients, with our employees?
Well, let me first of all just back up and say the education is mutual. Like every time I have a conversation with you, I walk away a better person. So that's very, very heartfelt, but also a gratuitous plug. It's so many things all wrapped up into one statement, but it's all true. So let's put that out there.
Yay. And allow yourself to breathe and allow it to happen.
Yeah. This is a beautiful program that you're putting together, and have an opportunity to talk about bias. You're right; it is a big topic, and I think too often in our society right now we get bogged down in small thinking, and it is really important to think big, and take the time necessary. The bigger the idea, the longer it's going to take to really get to a common understanding, and so it's. I appreciate you encouraging people to reach out and go to the website first, get as much information as you can, because it's just going to make you want to pursue even more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, as you started, I remember your tagline. Your tagline pulled me in right away when I first met you and heard you speak, because I'm like, okay, I don't have any biases. And I'm sure many people went straight there in their heads, right? But once you started speaking, I'm like, wow, this has implications in so many areas. How do you treat your spouse? How do you treat your kids, your employees, the workplace, your friends? It has implication in so many places. And of course, we could even say for marketing as well, because that's also part of this as well. You know, you're trying to get out and you're trying to communicate who you are as a brand and as a business as well. So it has huge implications on how the things you allow your marketing person to do, right?
Yeah. I think um, it's super important to make sure that you're talking about the type of bias that the other person is understanding. And when you and I first met, you were thinking racial bias, like that's immediate and strongest association
Sure.
for what bias is. And where if you have a group of white executives, they may not think racial bias right out of the gate,
Mm.
right? They may think gender bias. They may think age bias, depending on how old they are, right? Like there's so many different types of bias that become strongly associated it really is important to make sure that we're going beyond that and giving the time necessary to have a conversation about race. Like
Mm.
that's something that I think is rarely do you see quality outcomes when a conversation on racial bias is handled transactionally. Like
Mm.
we just want to do it and get it over with, or it takes time because there's a
Yeah.
lot of emotions that come up, and you need time to process all of the emotions that are coming up.
So you're saying this is not a quick fix, Matthew? We can't have it done in the 20 minutes and be, we're moving on.
Yeah,
No?
I'm not sure if that's a deeper societal value in the United States or if it's just a corporate value. Like, or maybe they're both the same. But no, there isn't
Maybe.
a pill that you can take that's going to make this all better. There's not a magic wand that you can wave that's going to make this go away. You can't eradicate, years of history in a single swipe or a single event or a single workshop.
Yeah. And maybe programming as well by the groups that we belong to as well, huh?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a key point. The groups that you belong to, right? That's a great inventory to take for yourself. Like how do you identify and with what groups?
And so I asked a question earlier, but I'm going to wrap it in just a little bit with something else. How does this come out in our interaction with other folks, no matter who they are? So people are people, right? How does this come out in our interactions with others?
Well, I think it depends on who you're talking about, because the othering mechanism in our brain is constant and active, and it's rooted in a survival heuristic, right? Like there's always a part of our brain, that unconscious area, most of the time, that's assessing for threat, and that's how we've survived. The tens of thousands of years that humans have been scavenging on this planet,
Mhm.
and now in our modern era, we really have to rethink and be cognizant of that primarily unconscious impulse. And it manifests itself in some really peculiar ways. One of them is like me bias, right? Like you gravitate towards people who are like you, and most of the time it's physical characteristics that drive that likeness. And it's part of the reason that we end up with the most segregated society on the planet on Sunday mornings, right? Like people are all gathered in their like tribes, and that's just an easy societal example to point to.
And I tell
Of
you, that's the one that weirds me out every time. It's like you're on at Sunday church and you self-segregated yourself. That one is heartbreaking because the book that it's all based on says completely the opposite of that, and you've missed that altogether, you know?
yeah. I mean, I think that's a great example of how bias then becomes institutionalized, and then it reinforces itself, right?
Okay.
And I think that ecosystem, the three types of bias, there's cognitive biases, these things that drive our thinking, our perceptions. Then they lead to social biases, right, that are best measured in behaviors. So
Mm.
racial bias, I think, is best measured in behaviors, like how you act. We all think stupid things from time to time, but what you do with those thoughts, how you act on those thoughts, matters. And that's, I think, the best realm for measuring social biases: gender, race, culture, age, orientation, abilities, identity. All of those areas are best measured in behaviors. And it's those behaviors over time is how bias becomes institutionalized, right? And there's lots of examples of that. The church is one of them.
Let's roll that into something that actually I almost missed this morning. So thank you for bringing it back into my attention and my scope. But anchoring bias, because I think it's perfect. Let's segue this to marketing because I mean, actually, on my playlist on Netflix, I have a couple of things in holding patterns. Companies who Abercrombie and Fitch, I mean, it's already there, that had a huge problem with how they were doing their marketing and the message that they were sharing with young people and society about what their standard of beauty was. And really, it trickled into how they ran the business, period. And so that's interesting that it can also work into your marketing efforts as well. Can you share a little bit about what exactly, as best as you can, because I know it's a big topic, what is anchoring bias?
Sure. It's anchoring bias is our brain's um, natural tendency to focus on the first image, graph, or number. And then that image, graph, or number serves to anchor the rest of the conversation. And so when you think of how this plays out in the retail industry, it's the reason that you see a lot of discounts where you'll see something with a red circle in it and a line that says like 20% off, and your brain just thinks, oh, I'll have two. Uh, it's the thinking behind the power of the first impression, right? Because our brains get anchored on that initial experience, and that serves to drive the rest of the conversation. It can ultimately drive the rest of that relationship, right? Whether or not you even continue in that relationship or not. It's a really powerful force, anchoring bias, and I think it has some very pernicious effects over time as well, especially when it comes to women, right? And this is where these biases start to overlap and intertwine and become even more thorny, right? Is women, right, when they're immersed in the sea of imagery that says you're supposed to be a certain way,
Mhm.
right? Like the whole cosmetic industry, billion-dollar industry, is rooted and built upon this very, very exploited type of anchoring bias,
Yeah.
getting you to then buy different products that you feel you need to make you whole or something like that. And men are you know are also subject to it. I don't want to put it all on women, but I think it's traditionally it's more damaging, I think, to women than it is to men.
Do you think this is part of the issue that we're having, that we're seeing right now with like Instagram and Facebook and the issues that they're having as well around with kids, because that's another target audience as well and how they're targeting kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really, we'll look back on this era of
Mhm.
social media and children,
Yeah.
um, and the damage that it's done to them, right? Like it's more of um, a societal value, I think, than it is just an individual. You can't fight it. We're in it. We're living it. The genie is out of the bottle, and
Mm.
the best that we can do, I believe, at this point, is to try to rein it in and give
Yeah.
some good guidelines, some healthy guidelines.
Yeah. I think, it's hard to say because all I am is an aunt of 13, and some great aunts of some other little crazies who are much smaller. But it sounds like we need to not have social media and television help with parenting anymore. Because clearly they need to be managed.
Well,
Clearly need to be
I,
managed.
I, I think all media is not created equal, and none of it is inherently evil.
Exactly.
Um,
This is the thing, right?
right. So, with I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son. I'm right in the
So
thick of it.
you're in the thing. God bless
And
you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the best I think that we could come up with is just to provide some very strong guidelines
Yeah,
and very firm boundaries.
yeah,
And so we're not going to, live in a delusional world that that our children are not going to, have uh, access to different devices, different content. But as parents, we can still enforce some guidelines and really strong boundaries. And so we limit the amount of screen time daily that our
yeah,
kids can consume.
yeah,
We and then we start to even get into these layered, nuanced conversations around what are you consuming, what are you taking in, and what are the messages that are being internalized through popular culture, through music, through art, through shows on Netflix, right?
yeah, yeah.
And not all of it is created equal, and not all of it is appropriate for you at that age.
Absolutely. It's funny. I feel like this is a message I've heard when I was growing up as well. My mom literally saying, "I can't control everything," but if I just layer in that message and the guidelines, you're gonna have to take it from there because that's the way great adults are created, right? I need to give you the great information, and sadly, I need to back away and let you utilize it on your own instead of micromanaging the situation, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think it's also an opportunity for a parent to, to step back and just be a parent. And in my case, my children are Afro-Bolivian American. They know Spanish is their first language, so they're identifying very differently than how I identify,
Yeah.
and yet we have these really nuanced conversations about how they show up and how they hold themselves and like who they are in this very different world that they're entering into than what I grew up in.
I'm going to segue a little bit to another aspect of bias and the resources that you shared. But the answer that you just gave kind of made me think about the belonging assessment that you are doing now. I know you've been sharing that a lot on LinkedIn. I am going to go over and do the assessment myself if possible. And can you tell me how that works into our day to day? Why would we need to take a belonging assessment? Don't we already know where we belong, Matthew? Like, what's happening?
Mm. I guess if you're part of a dominant caste in society, a diversity, equity, inclusion, a DEI initiative in place, many are starting to tackle this very aspirational goal of belonging. And I think you need to pause for a moment and ask, what does that even mean? I
Exactly.
think what I mean when I say belonging is this fundamental need that may have turned Maslow's hierarchy on its head, right? Like the sense of belonging, the need to be needed is greater than the need to survive. And for a
Right.
workplace to try to design a culture that's going to allow the vastness of their diverse employees to belong is a pretty audacious goal. And
Yeah.
so, what the belonging assessment is built on four cornerstones that we've identified as being the cornerstones of a culture of belonging. And it starts with identity, knowing who you are. It goes quickly into agency, like knowing who you are in the role that you have and being able to be confident in that role that you have within an organization. Power is the third cornerstone, and that's often just like the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
right? Yet
Yeah.
it's guiding so much of what happens inside of the context of a given meeting, right? If there's one person that has all the power, everybody else is just jockeying to try to get close to that person, right?
Yeah.
And be in close proximity to that power. And I
Yeah.
think they're denying their own sense of agency and they're minimizing their power. It's not an empowering culture when you're not really laying these cards out onto the table. And when you do, you can end in the fourth cornerstone, which is flow. And that's that, very transcendent state that work can be when you have aligned it with your purpose.
Okay. I mean, you've given us a lot of information here to kind of roll through, but I guess my next question would be, what do we do with some of this information? How do we execute this? How do we start making changes in our environment, whether you're a small business or a large business, whether you have 5 employees or 500 employees or more? Um, what are some of the things that you can do? I mean, I'm giving you a shameless plug here, but I really want you to break it down because I want to know, like, how can we start this process with Matthew?
It starts with a conversation, and that can quickly go into either an assessment, an audit, an evaluation, really figuring out where both you as an individual are,
Yeah.
as well as collectively where your business is at. And one of the things that I and the Precipio company do better than most is meet people and groups of people where they are. And then we use that as the building blocks to get where you want to go. And that could be increasing Black representation on your board. That could be, making sure that you're considering the widest possible pool of candidates to really or organically change the demographics within your organization with the best qualified candidates. And you realizing that you're more likely have missed out on candidates because you were going back to very biased pools
Information.
of prospects, right?
Mhm.
So I think it really is embracing diversity as a fundamental strength for your business rather than a problem that needs to be fixed.
Wow. Um, I'm hearing you, you know. One of the things that I'm also hearing is, again, with especially with my clients on the marketing side, because people think of marketing as tactics, right? All these things. Let's just do Facebook, let's do Instagram, all of these things, but they don't understand the bigger picture. And as a tie-in, brain and bias, let's tie it into marketing then, because what I'm hearing is, in order to start the marketing plan, I need to understand your bigger picture of what you're trying to do and what you're trying to change, and leading the business to more innovative and creative ideas as you're moving forward. So it sounds like an assessment needs to happen from Matthew right off the bat, before we move into anything. What are some of the things that you do with your clients, once they're your clients?
Uh, the first is that assessment, and so there's a bias assessment that you can get at the Precipio company website. There's a belonging assessment that you can take a look at. Both of them give you introductions into the conceptual framework, the language that's being used, and are designed to be conversation starters. And so by taking those steps, you're approaching it with a measure of curiosity. The details of what happens after that is usually a combination of consulting, where I'll work with the HR teams to refine processes to make them more inclusive. We'll put some programming elements in place where we'll do workshops for employees that
Okay.
aren't one and done, right? They're designed to create behavior change, right? Getting people to engage with each other in a more meaningful way creates more productivity. That's the byproduct, right?
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
very tangible work benefits towards doing this type of work.
I'm loving that, by the way, because it's not pointing all of the fingers at the management and the business owner only. The employees are part of the circle, right? I mean, it's only logical.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a worst practice to just have it start at the top and think that trickle down anything never works. Like it's like snot trickles down. You don't want a trickle down policy. It's just not a best practice.
Oh, yeah. And that's failed politically as well, hasn't it? Economically as well. Although I love that people are still hanging on to it. It's like, did you not take basic economics in college? Come on, work with it. I love that you're trying hard, though. It's like, no, it's working, you know.
Yeah, yeah. People hang on to some anachronistic ideas, that's for sure.
No, absolutely, So, any final thoughts that you can offer here? So now we have some solutions. We know how to get to you, maybe to start the conversation. It sounds like just at least starting the conversation might be a great way. Taking one of the assessments. Like I said, I know I did it way back when, or I don't know if I did or not, but I will be taking because there are a few on your site. So I'm taking that belonging one. And by the way, guys, I will drop that link into LinkedIn as well. You can go to the website, it's there as well, but I will drop it in instead of having you searching for it. Um, Again, you have a lot of great resources on, so I'm excited about taking it to see what happens. I feel like I was asked this question this week, actually, coincidentally, the networking group that we're both part of. I never know if I should say the name or not. But they've been asking a question this week, which was, of course, how would you deal with someone who said something that makes you uncomfortable? Like, and they gave a couple of choices. And I love that a lot of people, their answer was to really ask more, to find out where this person's coming from. I feel like that's a direct result of you, Matthew. Because with some of the seminars you've been doing within the group, I think you bet people throw around your tagline. It's like it's a new saying now. So I feel like that was it. But the big comment here is I'm always mystified by that little 7 to 10% that I'm seeing in every meeting that I don't see anything. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful. Like, what is everyone talking about? And of course I'm being dramatic here, but I'm kind of going through their headspace thinking it's like, is that really what you're thinking? You know? And so yeah, no, that's been an interesting observation I've been seeing lately. Have you seen the survey in any of the meetings that you've been to?
Uh, I have not seen the survey data that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah,
I think it's alluding to there's a fundamental shift in corporate America
yeah,
that many people are struggling to keep up with from all across a racial, gender, cultural, age spectrum, and that the change in the landscape is one of the changes can be summed up like this: like 20 years ago, let's just draw that arbitrary number in the
mhm,
sand. Uh, there was a social norm that said, you don't talk religion or politics in polite discourse.
our
And
money, our sex.
and you can add on to that, right? And I think the workplace, what we thought of as the workplace, embraced that,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah,
as the workplace has continued to grow, the workplace meaning more of an office environment, right?
yeah,
Where you have more and more and more people, more diversity going into this office workplace,
yeah,
it's impossible to not bring yourself into it. And,
exactly.
and so to think that you can avoid, certain taboo topics is ludicrous because
Yeah,
the nature of our work doesn't allow that, right? This is the first one of the first times in human history where you could have 5 different named generations of people all working on one project together. You could have 5 different ethnicities, 5 different identities, 50 different identities, all
yeah,
working together in some collaborative manner.
yeah.
How could you not have an appetite for embracing and learning more about who all of these the differences are? Because that's where
Yeah.
our strength is.
No, absolutely. And ensuring that we are having the right conversations to make sure that everyone's feeling included. I actually, a little short story here. I actually was speaking to one of my graphics persons. He's in Pakistan. I mean, we speak almost every morning. Of course, not this month as much because it's Ramadan. But, he was telling me we made the decision was made not to do any work for him on Fridays because Fridays are kind of like their church day, basically.
Totally
It's
did.
you know
Yeah.
s- exactly, and of course he's explaining it to me, and I went, basically that's Sunday church and brunch is what you just described to me, and he goes, that is how it got. I said, absolutely. family gets together, we go to church, we have brunch. And I said, what's the difference? You guys get together, you have breakfast, you go to the mosque, you come back, you have lunch. I'm like, that's the same thing. But we try to make things so separate, right, and different from they're different from me. Yeah, mosque versus a church, still the same environment, but that kind of caught me just now as you made that comment. Any final words for us? Any wise, sagent words that you'd like to share with us, sir?
Oh goodness. Uh,
There's so much, right?
I've 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 given up on giving advice because the wise don't need it and the ignorant won't heed it. So I try never to give advice.
I actually, and that's a wonderful way of wrapping up the show. Everyone, please reach out to my guest today, Matthew. Thank you so much for being on the show. And of course, if you're ready for marketing, please reach out to me as well. Again, our continued mission statement is to introduce you to everyday experts and business owners to share their expertise to help you to up level. I also offer marketing tips as well through the month. 10 at 10 airs every Thursday at 10 a.m. live on LinkedIn. Viewers, you continue to amaze me through this crazy period. As Matthew said, there are either people who move forward and are willing to listen, or someone who's stuck in the mud, right? The quote today that I like to wrap up with, I think, is kind of works, which is, if you've got a brain, you need to use it. It's the most important equipment that you have. Kevin Andrews, he's a politician in Australia. Matthew, thank you so much again for being on the show. I appreciate it. I've been trying to get you on and forgetting and calling you. And so I really appreciate just us having this conversation this morning.
Oh, Paula, you are a joy. Your energy is
Thank you.
infectious, and I I look forward to more referrals going your way.
Oh, no. And same here as well, because you educated me quite a bit this morning. So we need to do a doika again, sir. We haven't done one in a while. That was very educational. Everyone, thank you so much. Keep moving forward. Have a great rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
That's